There is a particular heavy silence that settles over a landscape once the hands that tilled it have long since returned to the earth. In the quiet corners of a study, where the ink of old ledgers has faded to the color of dried oak leaves, one might almost hear the phantom echo of a blacksmith's hammer or the soft lowing of cattle in a pasture that is now but a memory. These lives, once so vibrant with the concerns of harvest and hearth, exist now only as elegant script on brittle parchment, waiting for a patient eye to trace the contours of their vanished world. Welcome to the American Gazetteer. Tonight, we turn the pages of history back to the year of our Lord 1880, as we cast our gaze upon the gentle undulations and fertile promise of DuPage County, Illinois. The county of DuPage sits as a rectangular jewel upon the Illinois plain, a modest territory of some 340 square miles carved from the greater Cook County in the earlier decades of our century. It is bounded to the north by the rolling hills of Lake County and to the south by the fertile reaches of Will, while its eastern flank meets the encroaching influence of the great city of Chicago. To the west lies Kane County, separated by a line as straight as a surveyor's chain could cast. In the year 1880, the population of this tranquil domain numbered nearly 19,000 souls, a collection of industrious families scattered across 9 distinct townships. Wayne, Bloomingdale, and Addison to the north, Winfield, Milton, and York across the center, and Naperville, Lisle, and Downers Grove holding the southern tier. The air here carries a different quality than that of the lakefront, smelling deeply of damp earth, curing hay, and the sweet, resinous scent of the remaining hickory groves. The soil of DuPage is its greatest treasure, a rich, black vegetable mold of such depth and fertility that it seems to pulse with a life of its own. Beneath this dark mantle lies a substratum of yellow clay, and deeper still, the limestone foundations that provide the county with its structural integrity. The geography is characterized by undulating prairies and occasional ridges of glacial drift, which provide the necessary elevation for drainage. Along the banks of the west branch of the DuPage River, the earth is particularly moist and generous, supporting a lush carpet of bluestem and compass plants that once towered over the heads of the early explorers. Men like Rufus Blanchard and Erastus Gary walked these fields when the paths were merely deer trails, observing the way the light played across the tallgrass like waves upon a golden sea. The land does not yield its bounty easily, requiring the steady hand of the husbandman and the sharp edge of the John Deere plow to turn the stubborn sod into productive tilth. Water is the lifeblood of this region, and the twin branches of the DuPage River wind through the townships with a slow, deliberate grace. The West Branch enters from the north, meandering through Wayne and Winfield before finding its way toward the historic settlement of Naperville. The East Branch mirrors this journey, cooling the cattle in Milton and Lisle as it seeks its confluence to the south. These streams are not the raging torrents of the mountainous east, but rather steady, dependable currents that have powered the grist mills and sawmills of the settlers for decades. Along the margins of these waters, one finds the willow and the cottonwood, their leaves shimmering with a silvery light in the afternoon breeze. Salt Creek also makes its presence known in the eastern townships of Addison and York, providing a habitat for the waterfowl and a source of hydration for the thirsty timberlands that dot the prairie landscape. As one travels through the county, the transition from the wild prairie to the cultivated farmstead is marked by the presence of sturdy fences and the orderly rows of the orchard. The early pioneers, such as the Naperville and Wheaton families, understood the necessity of sheltering their homes from the fierce winter winds that sweep across the open plains. Thus, many farmhouses are nestled within the protective embrace of a grove or a carefully planted windbreak of evergreens. These dwellings, often constructed of timber harvested from the local woods or brick fired from the native clay, stand as monuments to the permanence of the community. In the quiet evenings of late autumn, the smoke from 100 hearths rises straight into the cooling air, signaling the end of another day of honest labor. The rhythmic clinking of a blacksmith's hammer or the distant lowing of a Jersey cow provides the only soundtrack to a world that moves at the speed of a walking team. The arrival of the steam locomotive transformed the silent prairie into a bustling corridor of commerce, forever altering the cadence of life within the county boundaries. It was the Galena and Chicago Union Railroad that first pierced the stillness of the western landscape, bringing with it the soot-streaked faces of engineers and the heavy, rhythmic thrum of iron wheels upon steel rails. This mechanical intrusion did not merely transport grain and livestock. It dictated the very survival of settlements, birthing new villages where the tracks paused and casting into shadow those bypassed by the whistle's cry. In the northern reaches, the Chicago and Northwestern line provided a vital artery for the farmers of Wayne and Winfield, while the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy served the southern townships with equal vigor. The station houses became the new cathedrals of the age, places where the smell of coal smoke mingled with the scent of freshly planed pine and the anticipation of the morning post. The shift of the county seat from Naperville to Wheaton remains a subject of quiet reflection for those who remember the spirited debates of the previous decades. By the census year of 1880, the transition was complete, yet the architectural dignity of Naperville's older structures continued to command respect along the banks of the DuPage River. Wheaton, positioned strategically upon the high ground of the Northwestern line, flourished as the legal and political heart of the region. Here, the courthouse stood as a symbol of Victorian order, its halls echoing with the measured footsteps of men like Judge Elbert Gary and the scholarly Rufus Blanchard. The rivalry between these two centers of influence, the one a riverside pioneer settlement and the other a railroad-born hub, shaped the character of the citizenry, fostering a local pride that was both fierce and industrious. Neighbors gathered on the courthouse steps to discuss the price of corn, the quality of the latest harvest, or the nuances of township law. As you listen to these accounts from your own quiet corner of the world, perhaps resting in a room where the modern world feels momentarily distant, I invite you to reflect upon the ground beneath you and the layers of history that reside there. We are all transient occupants of this land, and by dwelling upon the steady lives of those who came before us, we preserve their legacy against the erosion of time. If you find value in these tranquil journeys through our shared American past, I encourage you to remain a regular correspondent of this gazette by subscribing to our annals, ensuring that these stories of quiet husbandry and community are never truly lost to the silence of the archives. It is through our collective attention that the flickering lamps of the 19th century continue to cast their warm, amber glow upon our present understanding. In York Township, the landscape began to assume a more refined aspect as the influence of the city to the east prompted the growth of suburban retreats. Elmhurst and Hinsdale emerged as places of beauty and order, where the ruggedness of the pioneer farm gave way to the manicured lawns and stately residences of the gentleman farmer. Thomas Barber Bryan, a man of great vision and refinement, contributed significantly to the elegance of Elmhurst, establishing an estate that reflected the Victorian ideal of harmony between man and nature. In Hinsdale, the streets were laid out with a deliberate grace, shaded by rows of young maples and elms that would one day form a majestic canopy over the thoroughfares. This was a world of fine carriages, evening strolls, and the polite exchange of pleasantries across picket fences. Despite this burgeoning sophistication, the fundamental industry of the land remained agricultural, with dairy farms in the surrounding countryside providing fresh milk and butter to the growing populations of the nearby townships. The intellectual and spiritual life of the county found its zenith in the halls of Wheaton College, an institution dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge and the cultivation of character. Under the guidance of Jonathan Blanchard, the college became a beacon of moral conviction, its stone buildings rising firmly from the prairie sod as a testament to the enduring power of faith and education. Students from across the Midwest traveled to this quiet corner of Illinois, filling the boarding houses and local churches with a youthful energy that complemented the steady industry of the townspeople. Sunday mornings in DuPage were marked by the clear, resonant peal of church bells from the steeples of Baptist, Methodist, and congregational houses of worship. Families like the Galushes and the Jewels would dress in their finest wools and linens, traveling by wagon or on foot to join their neighbors in a shared moment of devotion and community reflection. The Sabbath provided a necessary pause in the labor of the week, a time for the spirit to find rest before the plow was returned to the furrow on Monday morning. The life of a DuPage County farmer is dictated by a calendar far older than any printed by the local presses in Wheaton or Naperville. It is a sequence of labors written in the thawing of the creek ice, the first call of the meadowlark, and the lengthening shadows of the autumn equinox. By the time the summer heat settles over the townships of Bloomingdale and Addison, the landscape has transformed into a patchwork of verdant intensity. Here, the great cereal crops of the West, the corn, the oats, and the winter wheat, stretch toward the sun with a silent, staggering vitality. The Fisher family in Addison, much like their neighbors, understands the quiet language of the soil, observing the subtle shifts in color that signal the grain is ready for the reaper. There is a profound, rhythmic peace in the sight of a golden wheat field rippling under a prairie breeze, a visual manifestation of a year's hopes and the steady, unhurried passage of time. As the season matures into the late weeks of August, the air becomes heavy with the scent of curing hay and the dry, metallic tang of ripening corn. This is the era of the great thrashing circles, where the spirit of community husbandry reaches its most industrious expression. The heavy, steam-powered thrashing engines, monsters of iron and brass, lumber from farm to farm, their arrival heralded by a plume of dark smoke on the horizon. At the Churchill farmstead in Milton, the neighbors gather with their wagons and teams, creating a choreographed scene of sweat and chaff. The men pitch the bound sheaves into the hungry maw of the separator, while the women prepare long tables laden with the fruits of the kitchen, hams, sourdough breads, and jars of preserved berries. It is a time of immense physical exertion, yet it is conducted with a measured, Victorian dignity, as if every stroke of the pitchfork is a contribution to a grand, communal hymn of survival. Beyond the grain fields, the dairy industry has begun to cast a long, cooling shadow across the county's economy. The lush, well-watered pastures of Lisle and Downers Grove provide the ideal environment for the noble Holstein and the gentle Jersey. On the Hobson estate near Naperville, the morning ritual begins in the blue-gray light of dawn, the rhythmic sound of milk hitting the bottom of a tin pail providing a steady percussion to the awakening world. This white gold is often transported to local creameries or directly to the rail depots for the thirsty markets of Chicago. The architecture of the dairy barn, with its high lofts and ventilated cupolas, has become a defining feature of the DuPage skyline. Inside these structures, the air is thick with the sweet smell of clover hay and the warm bovine breath of the herd, creating a sanctuary of quiet productivity that remains unchanged even as the decades march forward toward our present day. In Fullersburg, the steady rumble of the Graue mill serves as a reminder of the vital link between the field and the hearth. Here, Frederick Graue and his sons oversee the transformation of local corn and wheat into the fine flours that sustain the populace. The massive limestone grinding stones, powered by the persistent flow of Salt Creek, rotate with a heavy, grinding groan that can be felt in the very floorboards of the mill. Farmers wait their turn in the shade of the nearby oaks, their wagons laden with sacks of grain, exchanging news of the weather and the latest innovations in agricultural machinery. The mill is more than a place of industry. It is a crossroads of human experience, where the physical reality of the harvest is refined into the substance of life. The fine, white dust of the milling process coats every surface, turning the interior of the structure into a ghostly, monochromatic realm of unhurried motion. As the year wanes, the focus of the farmstead shifts to the orchard, where the heavy boughs of the apple trees hang low with the weight of the fruit. Varieties such as the Northern Spy, the Winesap, and the Russet are harvested with careful hands, their skins cool and waxy to the touch. In the farmhouses of Winfield and York, the air is filled with the spicy, aromatic scent of cider pressing and the bubbling of apple butter in large copper kettles. This is the final, sweet labor of the growing season, a time for replenishing the larder and preparing for the lean months of the Illinois winter. The cellar, with its stone walls and earthen floor, becomes a cathedral of preservation, housing bins of potatoes, crocks of salt pork, and hundreds of jars filled with the colors of the summer garden. It is a scene of profound security, a testament to the foresight and industry of the DuPage family, ensuring that the quiet continuity of life remains unbroken through the frost. While the vast stretches of the county are defined by the furrow and the fence, the villages of DuPage serve as the vital nodes where the solitary life of the farm intersects with the bustling energy of the shop and the post office. In the year 1880, towns like Naperville and Wheaton functioned as the civic anchors for the surrounding townships, their main thoroughfares lined with the architectural expressions of Victorian optimism. The sounds of these streets are a tapestry of 19th century life, the rhythmic clip-clop of horseshoes on packed earth, the distant ring of the cooper's hammer, and the low murmur of neighbors gathered beneath the striped awnings of the general store. Here, the ruggedness of the frontier has long since vanished, replaced by a settled, unhurried air of permanence that suggests a community deeply rooted in its own soil. The general store remains the true center of the village social fabric, a place where the scent of coffee beans, kerosene, and bolts of calico fabric blend into a singular, comforting aroma. Men like Willard Scott in Naperville or the Gary family in Wheaton curated these spaces with a meticulous eye, stocking shelves with everything from Sheffield steel knives to the latest patent medicines from the East. Behind the heavy wooden counters, the merchants' scales balance the needs of the community, weighing out measures of sugar, salt, and tobacco against the credit of a future harvest. It is a quiet sanctuary of commerce, where the lighting is dim and the floorboards creak with the weight of decades. In the corner, near the pot-bellied stove, a group of elders might sit in silent contemplation or quiet debate, their pipes tracing slow curls of blue smoke toward the high, tin-pressed ceiling. Beyond the mercantile shops, the specialized trades maintain the physical infrastructure of the county. The blacksmith's shop is a cavernous realm of heat and shadow, where the bellows breathe a rhythmic life into the coals of the forge. Here, the smith works with a practiced, stoic grace, shaping the iron shoes for the heavy draft horses of the Rehem and Stunkel farms. The metallic clang of the hammer upon the anvil provides a steady heartbeat for the village, a sound that signifies the strength and resilience of the local economy. Nearby, the wheelwright and the harness maker ply their crafts with equal dedication, ensuring that the vehicles of transport, the buggies, the buckboards, and the heavy farm wagons, are kept in perfect repair for the muddy demands of the Illinois roads. Civic life is also defined by the presence of the printed word, with local newspapers such as the Wheaton Illinoisan or the Naperville Clarion serving as the heralds of local and national events. In the small, ink-stained offices of these journals, the editor meticulously assembles the columns of lead type that will carry the news of births, marriages, and the price of livestock to the furthest corners of the townships. The arrival of the weekly paper is a momentous occasion in the rural household, providing a window into the wider world while reinforcing the bonds of the local community. These gazettes, printed on heavy rag paper that survives to our present day, document the steady progress of DuPage County with a gentlemanly prose that reflects the Victorian values of industry, sobriety, and civic pride. As the evening shadows stretch across the village greens, the domestic sphere takes precedence. The homes of the merchants and professional men, often situated a short walk from the business district, are models of Victorian restraint and charm. These residences, with their gingerbread trim and neatly kept gardens, represent the success of the DuPage middle class. Inside, the parlor is a place of quiet refinement, where the family gathers around the reed organ or the piano to sing the sentimental ballads of the era. The glow of the kerosene lamp casts a soft, warm light upon the wallpaper and the framed lithographs of pastoral scenes, creating an atmosphere of profound domestic security. It is here, in the quiet heart of the village, that the values of the 19th century are most clearly visible: a life of order, a commitment to family, and a deep, abiding respect for the traditions of the past. In the quiet townships of DuPage, the pursuit of knowledge is regarded with a solemnity second only to the observance of the Sabbath. By the year 1880, the landscape was dotted with the humble yet sturdy silhouettes of the district schoolhouses, often situated at a central crossroads to accommodate the walking distance of the farm children. These structures, frequently painted in the traditional red or a simple, weather-beaten white, served as the primary engines of literacy and character for the burgeoning generation. Inside, the air would be thick with the scent of chalk dust, wood smoke from the central stove, and the faint, sweet aroma of the prairie grass drifting through the open windows. The Fisher and Bowerman children, alongside their peers, sat upon hand-planed benches, their slates scratching a rhythmic accompaniment to the teacher's steady recitation of the McGuffey readers. The teacher, often a young woman of the community or a graduate of the nearby Wheaton College, occupied a position of profound respect and modest influence. Her desk was a bastion of order, adorned with a globe of the world, a well-thumbed Bible, and a collection of inkwells. Education in this era was not merely an academic exercise, but a moral one. Lessons in arithmetic and geography were inextricably woven with the Victorian virtues of honesty, industry, and thrift. The discipline was firm yet measured, reflected in the straight backs of the students and the tidy rows of copybooks that lined the shelves. In the winter months, the schoolhouse became a sanctuary of warmth against the biting Illinois frost. The fire in the cast-iron stove, tended diligently by the older boys who arrived early to ensure the hearth was ready for the day's instruction. Beyond the primary schools, the county boasted centers of higher learning that drew scholars from far beyond the Illinois borders. Northwestern College in Naperville, established by the Evangelical Association, provided a rigorous curriculum that blended theological study with the classical arts. The campus, with its dignified masonry and gravel paths, offered a space for quiet contemplation and intellectual growth. Here, the sons and daughters of the prairie learned the languages of the ancients and the principles of natural philosophy, preparing them for lives of leadership in the pulpit, the courtroom, or the counting house. The slow, deliberate pace of campus life mirrored the agricultural world outside, where the growth of a mind was seen as a process as patient and necessary as the maturation of a winter wheat crop. Literature and the exchange of ideas were not confined to the schoolroom. The private libraries of the DuPage gentry were often extensive and well curated. In the homes of the Blanchards or the Garys, one might find the works of Longfellow, Dickens, and Emerson bound in heavy leather and gold leaf. The evening hours were frequently devoted to reading aloud by the light of a kerosene lamp, a practice that brought the family together in a shared imaginative journey. These books were more than mere entertainment. They were the tools of a sophisticated culture, providing a bridge between the isolated farmstead and the great intellectual currents of the 19th century. The rustle of a turning page and the soft crackle of the fireplace were the only sounds in many a DuPage parlor during the long, contemplative nights of the winter season. Finally, the Lyceums and debating societies of the villages provided a public stage for the exercise of the intellect. In the town halls of Downers Grove or Lisle, citizens gathered to hear lectures on scientific discoveries, travels to distant lands, or the pressing social questions of the day. These gatherings were conducted with a formal Victorian etiquette, where the art of rhetoric was practiced with a rhythmic, measured cadence. The exchange of ideas was seen as a communal duty, a way to sharpen the collective wit and ensure that the progress of the county was matched by the enlightenment of its people. As the participants walked home under the vast, starlit canopy of the Illinois sky, the echoes of the evening's discourse would linger in the cool night air, a testament to the enduring hunger for knowledge that defined the DuPage character. While the primary character of DuPage County is undeniably agricultural, the year 1880 found the region supporting a quiet but vital network of craftsmen whose hands shaped the material reality of daily life. In the smaller hamlets such as Itasca and Bensonville, the rhythmic song of the wood plane and the chisel could be heard echoing from the workshops of the cabinet makers. These men, often of German or New England stock like the Franzen family, worked with the native hardwoods, white oak, walnut, and cherry, to fashion the sturdy furniture that graced the farmhouses and village residences. A chest of drawers or a dining table from this era was built with an eye toward the generations, featuring dovetailed joints and hand-rubbed finishes that celebrated the honest grain of the wood. The workshop, with its floor covered in fragrant curls of shavings and its walls lined with specialized hand tools, was a place of slow, deliberate creation. In the township of York, the presence of the tile and brick kilns signaled a transition in the very substance of the county's architecture. As the farmers sought to drain the lower, marshier sections of their acreage, the demand for clay drainage tiles grew exponentially. The kilns were massive, beehive-shaped structures of brick that glowed with an intense, subterranean heat during the firing process. Workers moved with a practiced caution, loading the raw clay forms into the ovens and tending the fires with seasoned cordwood. This industry was a literal transformation of the DuPage earth into the infrastructure of its own prosperity. The finished bricks, with their warm, earthy hues, were used to construct the more substantial farmsteads and the emerging business blocks in the village centers, providing a sense of fireproof security and Victorian permanence to the landscape. The needle and the loom also played their part in the domestic industry of the county. While the railroad brought manufactured textiles from the eastern mills, many households in the more rural districts of Bloomingdale and Winfield still maintained the tradition of home-spun utility. In the quiet afternoons, the the rhythmic whir of the spinning wheel or the steady clacking of a handloom provided a domestic soundtrack. Women of the household, such as those in the Meacham family, were skilled in the arts of dyeing with natural pigments, goldenrod, walnut hulls, and indigo, to produce fabrics of enduring color and strength. These textiles were then meticulously sewn into the garments and quilts that protected the family against the damp spring rains and the biting winter winds, each stitch a testament to the patient industry of the Victorian matron. The local brewery and the cooper's shed represented another facet of the county's specialized labor. In Naperville, the Stenger Brewery produced ales and lagers that were cooled in deep, limestone-lined cellars, utilizing the pure water of the local springs. The cooper, an artisan of immense precision, crafted the wooden barrels and casks required to store and transport these liquids. Working with staves of seasoned white oak and hoops of hammered iron, the cooper ensured each vessel was liquid-tight through a combination of heat, moisture, and mechanical pressure. The sound of the cooper's hammer driving the hoops home was a familiar cadence in the industrial sections of the town, a signal of the steady, unhurried commerce that sustained the local appetite and the regional market. As the day's labor drew to a close, these various craftsmen would lay aside their tools and return to their homes, their hands bearing the honorable marks of their trade. The transition from the workshop to the hearth was a slow, deliberate process, often involving a moment of reflection over the day's accomplishments. In the fading light, the villages of DuPage stood as monuments to this collective industry, a world built by hand, piece by piece, from the raw materials of the prairie. The leather maker, the tinsmith, and the stonemason each contributed to a physical environment that was as sturdy and reliable as the people themselves. This was a time when the quality of a man's work was his primary signature, and the quiet pride taken in a job well done was the bedrock upon which the community's future was built. In the year 1880, the spiritual landscape of DuPage County was as clearly defined as its physical boundaries. Above the rolling prairie and the clustered rooftops of the villages, the church spires rose like silent sentinels, pointing with wooden fingers toward the infinite Illinois sky. These structures were the center of gravity for the community, providing a moral and social framework that bound the diverse townships together. Whether it was the austere white clapboard of the Congregationalists in Wheaton or the sturdy brick of the German Catholics in Eala, the church house was a place where the heavy burdens of the week were laid aside in favor of a higher contemplation. The sound of the bell, echoing across the fields of Wayne and Lisle, served as a communal heartbeat, calling the faithful to gather in a shared expression of gratitude and hope. The interior of the sanctuary offered a sanctuary of cool, dim light and a particular, hallowed scent, a mixture of floor wax, old hymnals, and the faint traces of wood smoke. On Sunday mornings, the pews were filled with families whose names were synonymous with the land: the Hobson, the Naper, and the Drendel families. The service was conducted with a Victorian formality that favored the slow, deliberate reading of Scripture and the congregational singing of hymns that had been passed down through generations. There was no haste in these proceedings. The sermon was a lengthy, scholarly discourse that invited the listener to reflect deeply upon the mysteries of providence and the duties of the righteous man. In the quiet pauses between the verses, the only sound was the rustle of Sunday finery and the soft sighing of the wind against the stained glass windows. Beneath the shadow of the church or upon a gentle, windswept rise nearby lay the silent acre, the cemetery where the ancestors of the county found their final, earthly rest. In places like the Naperville Cemetery or the pioneer burial grounds of Downers Grove, the headstones of limestone and marble told the story of the region's growth and the heavy toll of the frontier. Here, the names of the first settlers were etched in weathering script, often accompanied by the symbols of their faith: a willow tree, a pointing finger, or a pair of weeping doves. To walk among these stones was to engage in a quiet conversation with the past, recognizing the ephemeral nature of the human journey against the enduring permanence of the soil. The grounds were kept with irreverent care, the grass mown by scythe, and the plots often adorned with the simple beauty of a wild rose or a sprig of evergreen. The church also functioned as the social hub for the township, sponsoring the sewing circles, the missionary societies, and the celebrated donation parties that supported the local pastor. These gatherings were moments of levity and connection in a life often defined by solitary labor. In the church basement or the large parlors of the deacons, women like those of the Graue and Wheaton households would gather to quilt, exchange recipes, and discuss the welfare of the neighborhood's less fortunate. The preparation of the church supper was an event of culinary significance, featuring vast quantities of fried chicken, potato salads, and the elaborate pies that were the pride of the DuPage housewife. These occasions reinforced the bonds of neighborliness, ensuring that in times of sickness or drought, no family would have to stand alone against the elements. As the sun sets on the Sabbath, a profound stillness descends over the county. The horses are returned to their stalls, the Sunday Bibles are placed back upon the parlor tables, and the flickering lamps are extinguished one by one. The influence of the church, however, remains, a steady undercurrent in the minds of the people as they prepare for the week of husbandry ahead. The values of the pulpit, patience, stewardship, and a quiet, unassuming faith become the invisible tools of the farmer and the merchant alike. In the dark, quiet reaches of the night, the white spires of DuPage continue to stand as markers of a world that understands its place in the grand design, a world where the rhythm of the spirit is as certain, and as slow as the turning of the seasons. When the last of the harvest gold is safely stored in the granaries, and the cattle are brought into the sheltered warmth of the barns, a new silence descends upon the townships of Wayne and Bloomingdale. The Illinois winter is a formidable presence, arriving not with a sudden blow, but with a slow, creeping frost that hardens the black soil of the DuPage plains until it rings like iron beneath the hooves of a horse. By the mid-months of the season, the landscape is often transformed into a vast, undulating sea of white, where the boundaries between field and road are erased by the drifting snow. In the year 1880, the winter was a time of enforced stillness, a season for the land to rest beneath its cold mantle, and for the farmstead to turn its attention inward to the flickering light of the hearth. Life in the winter kitchen of the Rahim or Stunkel households becomes the center of the world. The great wood-burning cookstove, often a product of the local iron foundries, serves as a source of both heat and sustenance, its iron surface radiating a dry, comforting warmth. Here, the work of the Victorian matron continues with a rhythmic, unhurried pace. Large pans of yeast bread rise near the reservoir, and the steam from a simmering stew of dried beef and root vegetables fogs the window panes. The sounds of winter are intimate. The soft hiss of the fire, the click of knitting needles as wool from the summer's shearing is transformed into heavy stockings, and the low, muffled voices of children studying their lessons by the yellow glow of the lamp. It is a time of profound domestic enclosure, where the family is knit together by the shared necessity of the season. Outside, the husbandry of the winter requires a steady, stoic constitution. The farmer must venture out into the biting wind to ensure the well-being of the livestock, breaking the thick ice on the water troughs with a heavy maul, and pitching down the sweet-smelling clover hay from the high lofts of the barn. These chores are performed with a deliberate, measured economy of movement, for the cold is a thief that steals the heat from one's bones. The horses, their coats grown thick and shaggy against the frost, stand in their stalls with heads lowered, their breath blooming in white clouds in the dim light of the lantern. There is a strange, stark beauty to the farmyard at dusk, when the purple shadows stretch across the snow, and the smoke from the house chimney rises in a straight, unwavering column toward the freezing stars. When the weather permits, the winter season offers its own unique forms of social grace. The sound of sleigh bells, a clear, silver tintinnabulation, announces the arrival of neighbors or the journey to a village social. A sleigh ride across the frozen reaches of Milton or Lisle is an experience of exhilarating stillness, the runners gliding silently over the packed snow, while the passengers huddle beneath heavy buffalo robes. In the villages, the frozen ponds and the quiet reaches of the DuPage River become the stage for skating parties. By the light of large bonfires built upon the banks, young men and women in their winter woolens glide across the black ice, their laughter echoing through the crisp air. These moments of levity are the precious rewards of the season, a brief loosening of the Victorian reserve before the return to the warmth of the home. As the winter vigil stretches into the early months of the new year, the thoughts of the DuPage husbandman begin to turn toward the spring. In the quiet hours of the evening, the seed catalogs from the east are consulted by the lamp's light, and the inventory of tools is checked against the coming needs of the field. This period of waiting is not one of idleness, but of preparation and hope. The cycle of the prairie is unyielding, and even in the depths of the freeze, the life of the county remains vibrant and expectant. The ice will eventually yield to the thaw, the river will regain its voice, and the black soil will once again receive the seed. Until then, the people of DuPage find contentment in the slow, rhythmic pulse of the winter hearth, secure in the knowledge that they have provided well for their own. As we look back from the year 1895, it is clear that the decade beginning in 1880 was defined by a quiet yet profound revolution in movement. The geography of DuPage County, once measured by the slow pace of an ox team or the tireless gait of a pioneer's horse, was being systematically stitched together by the iron threads of the railroad. The Chicago and Northwestern, the Chicago, Burlington and Quincy, and the Illinois Central became the new arbiters of distance. For families like the Meachams and the Paynes, the world had suddenly expanded. The journey to the great markets of Chicago, which once required a grueling 2-day trek through the swampy lowlands of York Township, could now be accomplished in a mere hour of comfortable, soot-flecked travel. The locomotive brought with it a new sense of temporal precision, as the village clocks were increasingly set not by the local noon, but by the infallible schedule of the morning express. The station houses in Lombard and Glen Ellen, then often referred to by their older names of Babcock's Grove and Danby, became the new village commons. Here, the telegraph key clicked with a frantic, metallic energy, carrying news of grain prices from the Chicago Board of Trade or personal messages from kin in the far-off eastern states. The platform was a stage where the drama of 19th-century mobility played out daily. The arrival of new immigrant families from Germany and Scandinavia, the departure of young men seeking their fortunes in the Western territories, and the steady flow of mail pouches that bound the county to the heart of the nation. These depots were constructed of local timber and stone, yet they pulsed with the cosmopolitan energy of a continent in motion, their waiting rooms filled with the scent of wet wool, tobacco, and the anticipation of departure. This era of steam did not merely move people, it transformed the very nature of husbandry in the county. The milk trains became a vital institution, stopping at every crossing in Lisle and Downers Grove in the early morning hours. Farmers would bring their heavy tin cans to the trackside platforms, where they were hoisted into ventilated cars destined for the city's dairies. This reliable access to a massive urban market encouraged the growth of specialized agriculture, allowing the DuPage farmer to move away from mere subsistence toward a more profitable, albeit more demanding, form of commercial dairy farming. The relationship between the rail and the soil was symbiotic. The railroad relied on the bounty of the prairie, while the farmer relied on the iron horse to deliver his perishables before the summer heat could take its toll. Yet for all the speed of the rail, the traditional thoroughfares, the plank roads and the dirt tracks remained the primary conduits for local life. In the census year of 1880, the maintenance of these roads was a civic duty, often performed by the farmers themselves as a way of paying their township taxes. Men would gather with their teams and scrapers, filling the ruts and grading the surfaces to ensure that the heavy wagons could pass even after the torrential rains of the Illinois spring. Along these roads, the stagecoaches of an earlier era were becoming a rare sight, replaced by the private buggies and carriages of the local gentry. The roadside remained a place of slow, incidental encounters, where a neighbor might pull his team to the side to discuss the quality of a standing crop or the health of a newborn calf, maintaining the personal touch that the locomotive threatened to bypass. As the sun dips toward the horizon, casting long, rhythmic shadows of the telegraph poles across the fields, one realizes that DuPage County in this period was a landscape in transition. It was a place where the ancient rhythms of the harvest were beginning to harmonize with the mechanical pulse of the industrial age. The smoke of the locomotive and the dust of the plow mingled in the twilight air, symbolizing a community that was both rooted and reaching. The iron thoroughfares did not destroy the quietude of the county. Rather, they provided the skeleton upon which the modern world would eventually be built. For the resident of 1880, the whistle of the train was not a disturbance, but a comforting signal of progress, a reminder that they were no longer a lonely outpost on the prairie, but a vital part of a great, expanding nation. As we conclude our retrospective journey through the year 1880 from our vantage point of 1895, we find that the true essence of DuPage County resides not in its grandest events, but in the quiet, cumulative weight of its everyday realities. The legacy of this fertile landscape is carried forward by the families whose names have become synonymous with the townships they helped to tame: the Garys, the Wheatons, the Napers, and the Blanchards. These pioneers and their descendants built a world of remarkable stability, where the transition from the wild prairie to a settled Victorian society was accomplished with a measured grace. The census ledgers of the era, filled with the copperplate script of diligent clerks, tell a story of steady growth and unhurried prosperity, recording a population that valued the permanence of the home and the sanctity of the soil above all else. The architecture of the county remains a physical testament to this period of settled continuity. The farmsteads, with their substantial barns and neatly painted dwellings, stand as monuments to the husbandry of the 19th century. Even as the century nears its close, the sight of a well-maintained orchard or a perfectly straight furrow in Milton Township evokes a sense of pride and peace. These structures were built to endure, utilizing the limestone from the local quarries and the timber from the remaining groves. They reflect a time when the pace of life was dictated by the rising sun and the turning of the seasons, a time when a man's word was his bond and his land was his legacy. And to look upon these homes today is to see the physical manifestation of a decade that prioritized character, industry, and the quiet dignity of the rural life. In the quiet evenings, when the wind settles and the prairie birds find their nests, one can almost hear the echoes of that lost decade. The rhythmic clink of the milk pail, the distant whistle of the Northwestern Express, and the soft murmur of a family gathered in the parlor are the sounds of a world that was both simple and profound. It was a time of immense transition, yet it was lived with a calmness that seems foreign to our increasingly hurried age. The people of DuPage in 1880 understood that they were part of a grander design, a continuity of labor and faith that stretched back to the first breaking of the sod and forward into an unknowable future. By preserving these memories, we ensure that the quiet virtues of that era remain a guiding light for our own. The rivers, the east and west branches of the DuPage, continue their slow, deliberate journey toward the south, much as they did when the first explorers traced their banks. They are the silent witnesses to the county's history, flowing past the mills of Naperville and the pastures of Lisle with a timeless indifference. The water remains a symbol of the lifeblood of the region, a constant in a world of change. As the century turns and the shadows of the 20th century begin to lengthen, the rivers remind us of the enduring power of nature and the importance of stewardship. The landscape has been altered by the hand of man, yet its fundamental character, the richness of its soil and the clarity of its waters, remains a heritage to be cherished and protected. As we close the pages of the American Gazetteer for tonight, we leave the residents of DuPage County in their well-earned rest. The year 1880 has taken its place in the long corridor of history, a decade of golden twilights and honest toil. We have walked through the fields of wheat, listened to the bells of the village churches, and sat by the warmth of the winter hearth. It is my hope that this journey has provided you with a sense of peace and a deeper appreciation for the quiet realities of the American past. May the steady, rhythmic pulse of history guide you into a restful slumber, secure in the knowledge that the stories of the land and its people are never truly lost, but merely waiting to be remembered. And thus we close the entry for DuPage County. Rest well.